The rain hammered against the windows of James Thompson's tiny flat as he sat at his small kitchen table, carefully counting coins. £1, £2, £3 and 20 pence. He counted again, hoping somehow the numbers would change. £23 and 40 pence. That was everything he had left until Friday, when he would get his next paycheck from Murphy's Cafe, where he spent 12 hours a day washing dishes and cleaning tables. James rubbed his tired eyes with the back of his hands. His fingers were red and rough from the hot dishwater and cleaning chemicals. Every muscle in his body ached, but the pain in his heart was much worse than any physical tiredness. He looked toward the small bedroom where his 7-year-old daughter Lucy was sleeping peacefully under her favorite pink blanket. That morning, Lucy had pointed to her school shoes while getting dressed. The black leather had worn so thin that her white socks were visible through the holes. Rainwater would soak through them in minutes. "Daddy, my feet get wet when I walk to school," she had said in her sweet, small voice. James had knelt down and looked at those worn-out shoes. He remembered buying them 8 months ago, feeling so proud that he could afford something new for his little girl. Now they were falling apart, just like everything else in their lives seemed to be. "We'll get you new ones soon, sweetheart," he had promised, kissing her forehead. Very soon. But soon felt like a word from another world. Soon meant having extra money. Soon meant not having to choose between buying food or paying the electric bill. Soon meant not lying awake at night wondering how long they could keep living like this. It had been exactly 2 years, 3 months, 12 days since Lucy's mother walked out of their lives. Sarah had left a note on this same kitchen table, next to a small pile of £20 notes. "I can't do this anymore, James," the letter had said in her neat handwriting. "I need a life with more promise, more hope. I'm sorry. Take care of Lucy. She's better off with you anyway." James had read those words so many times that he knew them by heart. He had never shown the letter to Lucy. How could he explain to a 5-year-old that her mother chose to leave instead? He told her that Mommy had to go far away for work, and maybe someday she would come back. Lucy still asked about her mother sometimes, especially when she saw other children with their mums at school. James always gave her the same gentle smile and said, "She loves you very much," but she had to go help other people who needed her. The light tasted bitter in his mouth every time, but it was better than the truth. James never blamed Sarah. Not really. Life with him had been hard. He had lost his good job at the factory when the company closed down. They had to move from their nice house to this tiny flat. Money became tighter every month. Sarah had grown quieter and sadder until one day she just couldn't stay anymore. But the loneliness was like carrying a heavy stone in his chest every single day. Some mornings, James woke up and for just a moment, he forgot that he was alone. Then reality would crash down on him like cold water. And he would remember that he was the only one responsible for Lucy's happiness, health, and future. Soft knocking at the door interrupted his dark thoughts. James frowned and looked at the old clock on the wall. 10:30 at night. Who would visit at this hour? He didn't have friends who came by anymore. Most people he used to know had slowly disappeared from his life when money became too tight for dinners out or drinks at the pub. The knocking came again, even softer this time. Almost like someone was afraid to disturb him. James walked to the door and opened it carefully. Standing in the hallway was a teenage girl, maybe 16 or 17 years old. She was soaked to the bone from the heavy rain outside. Her long brown hair stuck to her face and neck. Water dripped from her clothes onto the worn carpet of the hallway. But even though she was drenched and shivering, James could see that her clothes were expensive. Her jacket looked like real leather, and her jeans were the kind that cost more than James made in a week. Her shoes were designer brands that he had seen in shop windows but never dreamed of buying. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling, from cold and something else. Fear, maybe, or desperation. "I just need somewhere warm for the night. I won't cause any trouble. I won't steal anything or break anything. I just need to get out of the rain." James looked at this strange girl and saw something that made his heart skip. In her eyes, he recognized a look he knew very well. It was the same lost, frightened expression he saw in his own mirror every morning when he brushed his teeth. It was the look of someone who didn't know where they belonged in the world. Without thinking twice, without asking questions, James stepped aside and opened the door wider. "Come in," he said gently. "Let me get you a towel and something warm too. Drink." The first rays of morning sunlight crept through the thin curtains of James Thompson's small flat. Lucy stirred in her bed, slowly opening her eyes to the sound of quiet voices coming from the kitchen. For a moment, she forgot about the strange girl who had arrived in the rain the night before. Lucy padded barefoot across the cold floor in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes as she entered the tiny kitchen. She saw Emma sitting at their wobbly table with Lucy's school books spread out in front of her. Emma was looking at Lucy's math homework from yesterday, the same homework that James had been too exhausted to help with after his long shift at the cafe. "Good morning, sleepyhead," Emma said with a warm smile. Her hair was dry now and fell in soft waves round her shoulders. She had borrowed one of James's old sweaters, which was much too big for her, but she looked comfortable and rested. Lucy climbed onto the chair next to Emma, curious about what she was doing with her schoolwork. "Your math problems are really good," Emma said gently. "You got most of them right. Let me show you a trick for the ones that gave you trouble." Emma took Lucy's pencil and began explaining long division in a way that made it seem like a fun puzzle instead of boring homework. She drew little pictures next to the numbers and made up silly stories about the math problems that made Lucy giggle. 7 goes into 28 exactly 4 times, Emma explained, drawing for a little cats next to the number 7. "See, it's like these 7 cats each got exactly 4 fish for dinner, and they were all perfectly happy." Lucy watched with wide, bright eyes as Emma made mathematics seem magical and easy. No one had ever explained schoolwork to her in such a patient, creative way before. James always tried his best to help, but he was usually so tired after work that he would fall asleep at the kitchen table with Lucy's books still open in front of him. "You're really smart," Lucy said, looking up at Emma with admiration shining in her young face. "Will you be my big sister?" The innocent question hit Emma like a gentle punch to the heart. She had never experienced such pure, honest affection from another person. In her real life, back in her father's mansion, people only approached her because they wanted something from her family's money and power. Classmates at her expensive private school pretended to be her friends because they hoped to be invited to her father's business parties or because they wanted expensive gifts. But here was this sweet 7-year-old girl who knew nothing about Emma's wealth or family name. Lucy simply liked Emma for the person she was in this moment. Someone who took time to help with homework and drew funny cuts to make math problems easier to understand. "I'd love that," Emma whispered, fighting back tears that threatened to spill from her eyes. "I've always wanted a little sister." James stood quietly in the doorway, watching this scene unfold as he got ready for another long day of washing dishes and cleaning tables at Murphy's Cafe. He had woken up worried about how to explain Emma's presence to Lucy, but his daughter had accepted this stranger into their home as naturally as breathing. Seeing Lucy so genuinely happy made James's chest feel lighter than it had in many months. Emma had somehow braided Lucy's unruly hair into 2 perfect plaits, while he was getting dressed. Now she was making Lucy laugh with silly jokes about numbers and animals. James couldn't remember the last time he had heard his daughter laugh so freely and joyfully. Usually, mornings in their flat were rushed and stressful. James would hurry to get Lucy ready for school while preparing himself for work. Both of them eating quick breakfasts in silence because James was too worried about money and time to make conversation. "I don't have much to offer for breakfast," James said apologetically as he opened their nearly empty refrigerator. Inside were 2 eggs, a small carton of milk that would expire tomorrow, half a loaf of bread, and a jar of jam with just a thin layer left at the bottom. "That's okay," Emma replied quickly, her voice bright and cheerful. "I'm not very hungry anyway. I never eat much breakfast." But James was observant from years of taking care of Lucy on his own. He noticed how Emma's stomach made a small rumbling sound when she said she wasn't hungry. He saw how she carefully divided the foods, that Lucy got the larger portion of scrambled eggs and the thicker slice of toast with more jam spread on top. Emma insisted that Lucy drink most of the milk while she sipped plain water from a chip mug. When Lucy wasn't looking, Emma quietly gave her own piece of toast to the little girl, claiming she was already full after just a few bites. This girl, whoever she really was, had a genuinely kind heart. James could see it in every small action she took. "Would it be okay if I stayed one more day?" Emma asked quietly after Lucy had finished eating and gone to brush her teeth. "I can help clean the flat, or watch Lucy while you're at work. I'm not ready to go home yet." James looked into Emma's eyes and saw something that made his heart ache with recognition. It was the same pain he felt every morning when he woke up. That feeling of being lost, of not knowing where you truly belonged in the world. "Of course," he said softly. "Stay as long as you need." While James worked his double shift at Murphy's Cafe, washing endless piles of dirty dishes and wiping down greasy tables, Emma spent the day discovering a completely different world through Lucy's eyes. She walked the -1-year-old to school in the morning, holding her small hand as they navigated the busy streets together. Emma marveled at how Lucy skipped along the pavement, pointing out interesting things she noticed: a red bird sitting on a fence, a funny-shaped cloud in the sky, or a dog wearing a colorful sweater. Lucy found joy in the smallest details of their walk, chattering happily about her friends at school and the story her teacher had read yesterday. This was so different from Emma's own childhood. She had never walked to school every morning. A black car with tinted windows had driven her to her expensive private school, where she sat alone in the back seat while her driver navigated through traffic. She had never noticed birds or clouds or dogs because she was usually busy with her phone or worrying about upcoming tests. When Emma picked Lucy up from school in the afternoon, she watched the other children run excitedly to their parents. She saw mothers and fathers hugging their kids, asking about their day, laughing at their stories. Lucy ran to Emma with the same bright smile, throwing her arms round Emma's waist as if she had known her for years instead of just 2 days. Emma, I told my teacher about you," Lucy said breathlessly. "I said my big sister helped me with my math homework and made it fun. Mrs. Peterson said you sound very nice." Emma's heart swelled with an emotion she had never felt before. No one had ever called her their big sister. At her fancy school, she had acquaintances but no real friends. People knew her as Robert Whitmore's daughter, the girl whose father owned half the buildings in the city. They treated her with careful politeness, always aware of her family's power and money. But Lucy knew nothing about any of that to Lucy. Emma was simply the kind girl who made math problems easier and braided her hair in the morning. Emma was actually Emma Victoria Whitmore, daughter of billionaire businessman Robert Whitmore. Her father owned hotels, shopping centres and office buildings across England. Their house was more like a palace, with 23 rooms, 5 bathrooms, a swimming pool, and gardens that required a team of 6 people to maintain. She had run away from that worldly days ago, after the worst fight she had ever had with her father. He had missed her school play because of a business meeting in London. It was the 3rd important event he had missed that month, and Emma had finally exploded with anger and hurt. "You care more about making money than you care about me," she had screamed at him in his enormous study, surrounded by his awards and photographs with famous politicians. "Don't be ridiculous, Emma." Her father had replied without even looking up from his computer screen. "Everything I do is for you. This business will be yours someday." "I don't want your business," Emma had shouted back. "I want my father to actually care about me as a person, not as some future business partner." Robert Whitmore had finally looked at his daughter then, but his face had been cold and distant. "You're being childish and ungrateful. You have everything any girl could want. Everything except a father who loves me," Emma had whispered, and then she had run from that cold, perfect house, since her mother had died 3 years ago in a car accident. Emma had felt like a ghost in her own home. Her father threw himself into work to avoid dealing with his grief, leaving Emma alone with servants who were paid to take care of her but not to love her. For the past week, she had been sleeping in parks and bus stations, moving from place to place to avoid being found. She knew her father's private security team was searching the entire city for her. She had seen their black cars driving slowly through neighborhoods, and she had learned to hide behind buildings or duck into shops when she spotted them. But living with James and Lucy had shown Emma something she had never experienced before: a real family that truly cared for each other. James worked incredibly hard for a very little money, yet he always made sure Lucy felt loved and important. They shared everything they had, no matter how small or simple it was, that evening. As James cooked their dinner of pasta with tomato sauce and the last bit of cheese from their refrigerator, Emma helped Lucy with her reading homework. She listened patiently as Lucy sounded out difficult words, celebrating each small victory with genuine enthusiasm. James watched them from the kitchen, his face lighting up with pride every time Lucy successfully read a challenging sentence. He praised every effort she made, encouraging her when she struggled, making her feel smart and capable. "Dad works really hard for us," Lucy told Emma proudly as they sat round the small table sharing their simple meal. "He says, love is the most important thing we can give each other, and it doesn't cost any money at all." Emma felt tears burning in her eyes. Her father had never said anything like that to her. He showed what he thought was love through expensive gifts, designer clothes, the latest technology, trips to exotic places, but he had never simply sat with her like this, just enjoying her company and making her feel valued for who she was as a person. The guilt was eating at Emma's heart like a slow poison. These good, honest people were sharing their last pieces of bread with someone who could afford to buy the entire building they live in. On the 4th morning, Emma woke up to the sound of harsh coughing coming from the bedroom. She sat up quickly on the old sofa where she had been sleeping and listened with growing worry. The coughing sounded terrible, like someone was struggling to breathe properly. James rushed out of his small bedroom, his hair messy from sleep and his face filled with panic. He was carrying Lucy in his arms, and Emma could see immediately that something was very wrong. The little girl's face was bright red with fever, and her breathing was shallow and difficult. "Lucy, sweetheart, can you hear me?" James whispered, touching her burning forehead with his hand. Her skin was so hot it felt like touching a stove. Lucy's eyes were glassy and unfocused, and she couldn't stop coughing long enough to answer her father. Emma jumped up from the sofa, her heart racing with fear. In just 3 days, Lucy had become like a real little sister to her. Seeing the child so sick made Emma feel desperate to help. "We need to get you to the hospital, sweetheart," James said, trying to keep his voice calm even though his hands were shaking. He wrapped Lucy in her pink blanket and grabbed his jacket from the chair. Emma quickly put on her shoes and followed James out of the flat. They took the bus to the nearest hospital because James didn't have money for a taxi. During the 20-minute ride, Lucy's coughing got worse, and Emma held James's free hand, squeezing it tightly to give him strength. At the hospital, they waited for 2 hours in the emergency room before a doctor could see Lucy. James held his daughter the entire time, rocking her gently and whispering soft words of comfort. Emma sat beside them, feeling helpless and scared. Finally, a tired-looking doctor examined Lucy, listening to her chest with his stethoscope and checking her temperature. His expression grew serious as he completed his examination. "Your daughter has pneumonia," the doctor explained to James in a gentle but concerned voice. "It's quite severe, and she needs immediate treatment. We'll need to admit her to the hospital for at least 3 days, maybe longer. She'll need strong antibiotics and careful monitoring." James felt his world crashing down round him. "How much will it cost?" he asked quietly, though he was afraid to hear the answer. The doctor looked uncomfortable. "The total bill will be over £2,000. That includes the room, the medications, and all the treatments she needs." James felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. £2,000 might as well have been £1,000,000. He made about £300 a week at the cafe, and most of that went to rent and basic expenses. "I can set up a payment plan," James said desperately, his voice breaking with emotion. "I'll work extra shifts. I'll do anything. Just please help my daughter." The doctor nodded sympathetically, but then he called over the hospital's financial coordinator. The woman behind the desk looked at James with cold, businesslike eyes. "I'm sorry, sir," the receptionist said without any warmth in her voice. "Hospital policy requires at least half the payment up front before we can admit your daughter for treatment. That would be £1,000. Due today." James stared at the woman in disbelief. "But she's just a little girl. She's very sick. Surely you can make an exception." "I'm sorry, but rules are rules," the receptionist replied, already turning her attention to other paperwork. "You'll need to find the money or seek treatment elsewhere." Emma watched James's face completely crumble as the reality hit him. This man who had opened his home to a complete stranger in the rain, who had shared his last piece of bread with her, who had given up his own bed so she could sleep comfortably, couldn't afford to save his own daughter's life. James sank into a plastic chair and put his head in his hands. Emma could see his shoulders shaking as he tried not to cry in front of Lucy, who was curled up on his lap, still coughing weakly. Emma's heart broke into a million pieces. She couldn't stand there and watch this family suffer when she had the power to help them. She had been living a lie for days, pretending to be someone she wasn't while these good people shared everything they had with her. "James," she said quietly, pulling him aside to a corner where Lucy couldn't hear them talking. "I need to tell you something very important, something I should have told you from the beginning." James looked up at her with confused, red eyes. "What is it, Emma?" "My real name is Emma Victoria Whitmore," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "My father is Robert Whitmore." James stared at her for a long moment, trying to understand what she was saying. Even he, who spent his days washing dishes and had no time for reading newspapers or watching television, had heard of Robert Whitmore. Everyone in England knew that name. Robert Whitmore was one of the richest men in the country, a billionaire, who owned hotels and shopping centers and office buildings. I ran away from home 8 days ago, Emma continued, tears flowing freely down her face now. But I can help Lucy. I have money. I can pay for her treatment. Please let me help her. James felt a mixture of hurt, confusion, and hope all at the same time. Had this all been some kind of cruel game to her? Had she been laughing at their poverty while pretending to be their friend? I know you must hate me for lying to you, Emma whispered, seeing the pain in his eyes. But I swear to you, everything I felt in your home, everything we shared together, that was completely real. You and Lucy showed me what real love looks like for the first time in my life. Please, let me give something back to you. James looked across the waiting room at Lucy, who was getting sicker by the minute. His pride wanted to refuse Emma's help, but his love for his daughter was stronger than his hurt feelings. Emma pulled out her expensive phone with trembling hands and dialed a number she knew by heart but hadn't called in 8 long days. Her fingers shook as she pressed each button. Knowing that this phone call would change everything, the phone rang only twice before a familiar voice answered. Emma, is that really you? Her father's voice was filled with relief and worry and love all mixed together. Yes, Dad, it's me, Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. I need your help. There's a little girl here who's very sick, and her father can't afford to pay for her treatment. Where are you? I'm coming right now. Robert Whitmore said. Immediately, Emma could hear him moving round, probably grabbing his car keys and jacket. I'm at St. Mary's Hospital on Oak Street, Emma replied. Dad, please hurry. Lucy is really sick. Within 1 hour. Robert Whitmore arrived at the hospital with 3 men in dark suits who were part of his security team. Emma recognized the tall, serious man in the expensive grey suit immediately, even though he looked different somehow. His usually perfect hair was messy, and his eyes were red and tired, as if he hadn't slept for many days. Emma, he said, his strong voice breaking with emotion as he wrapped his arms round his daughter. I've been so scared. I thought I'd lost you forever. Emma hugged her father tightly, breathing in his familiar smell of expensive cologne and coffee. For the first time in 8 days, she felt completely safe. I needed to understand what a real family feels like, Emma said softly, pulling back to look at her father's face. James and Lucy taught me that love isn't about money or big houses or fancy cars. It's about being there for each other when things get hard. Robert looked across the hospital waiting room at James, who was sitting quietly with Lucy sleeping in his arms. This ordinary man in worn-out clothes had protected Robert's precious daughter when he had failed to do so himself. This stranger had given Emma food and shelter and kindness when she needed it most. Robert walked over to James and knelt down beside his chair. You took care of my daughter when she needed help, he said, his voice thick with emotion. How can I ever repay you for your kindness? James looked up at this powerful, wealthy man and saw something unexpected in his eyes. He saw the same love and worry for Emma that James felt for Lucy every single day. You don't owe me anything, sir, James replied simply, his voice honest and humble. Emma brought joy to our home. She helped my daughter smile and laugh again. She became part of our little family. But Robert Whitmore had already made up his mind about what he wanted to do first. He walked to the hospital's financial desk and paid for all of Lucy's medical treatment without asking any questions about the cost. Then he arranged for Lucy to have the best doctors in the hospital and a private room where she could recover comfortably. But Robert wanted to do much more than just pay medical bills. He had been thinking during the long, worried days while He searched for Emma. He realized that he had spent so many years focused on making money that he had forgotten how to show love to the people who mattered most. "James," Robert said as they sat together watching Lucy sleep peacefully in her hospital bed, "I want to offer you a job. I'm starting a new community outreach program to help families who are struggling with money. Problems I want you to manage." James stared at Robert in surprise. "Sir, I don't have any experience managing anything. I just wash dishes at a cafe. But you have something much more valuable than experience." Robert explained, "You have a heart that knows how to care for people. You understand what families need when they're going through hard times. I want to help people the way you helped Emma. Will you teach me how to do that?" James felt tears in his eyes. This job would mean he could provide properly for Lucy. He could buy her new shoes and warm clothes and healthy food. He could give her the kind of life she deserved. 6 months later, their lives had changed in ways none of them could have imagined. Emma split her time between her father's large mansion and James's modest but warm flat. She had become Lucy's big sister in every way that mattered, helping her with homework, braiding her hair in the morning, and sharing dreams about the future. James's new job managing the Whitmore Community Outreach Program paid him enough money to move to a better apartment and provide well for Lucy. But more importantly, it allowed him to help others struggling, families find hope and support when they needed it most. Robert had learned to spend real time with Emma, not just buying her expensive gifts. They had dinner together every evening when he was in town, and he never missed another school play or important event in her life on Lucy's 8th birthday. All four of them sat round James's old kitchen table in his flat, sharing chocolate, cake, and telling funny stories. Emma looked round at these faces she loved and realized she had found her real treasure. It wasn't money or fancy houses or designer clothes. It was the feeling of belonging to a family that truly cared about each other. "Thank you," Emma whispered to James, "for showing me that the best things in life can't be bought with money." James smiled warmly. "Thank you for reminding me that kindness always comes back to us, usually when we need it most." The end.